Hello and welcome to episode 15 of Overheard Orlando. This is the death episode. You know, this episode almost never got created. As a creative individual, I try to avoid cliches whenever I can, and being one of the very few universal human experiences, death is the absolute number one cliche ever. About 97% of anyone who has ever lived has died, and the other 3% will die as well. Cliches aside, though, death has kind of been in my orbit lately, and it's something that I just wanted to talk about a little bit, I guess. It just kind of seems like a lot of people that I know, it's been mostly friends of friends, family members of friends, have been passing away recently. The most glaring example would be a young lady who just passed away at 23 of cancer. Now, when I met her a few years back, she was 19, and she had the whole world ahead of her. Again, this all sounds cliche, but literally was in college. She was very light and fun, a very sweet girl, very smart, and by age 23, she just went on this apparently downhill battle against cancer, and unfortunately, she lost. This kind of goes into that whole cliche of you never really know. You never really know when it's going to happen. You never know how much time you have left. And while this young lady and I were not close enough to devastate me, we were close enough where it caused me to take, a long pause. This past Thursday, I got into a car accident, and while it wasn't fatal, it was fatal to my car, but it wasn't fatal to me, up until that point, I had my month planned out. As I mentioned in my last Instagram post, I've been a bit swamped at the office and stuff, and it's been really tough to create content in the time in between. But I had a plan. I had everything planned out. I had all my weeks planned out, everything. And in the blink of an eye, a woman sideswipes me, and those plans were out the window. And now I am dealing with insurance companies. Essentially, I'm in a place that I did not think I was going to be in last week. And that kind of applies to death in the same way. It kind of has that cliche surprise factor. Death doesn't always follow a schedule. It's supposed to be, grandparent, parent, child, grandchild, etc. But oftentimes it goes out of turn. People with metastatic cancer miraculously are cured, and healthy 25-year-olds get heart attacks. So it's really tough to predict. And for that very reason, I kind of try to ensure that I don't put too much credence into making plans, no matter how much comfort making and having these plans may bring to me. It's really interesting to try and understand how people think and talk about death, both the death of themselves as well as the death of others. It's something we're all going to have to go through, and it's something we all go through in one way or another in a daily basis. So now I'd like to present to you the thoughts of my dear friend and Orlando Weekly Best of nominee for Best Comedian here in Orlando, Simon Nash. I know that getting a take on death from a comedian might seem a little odd, or hell, it might seem cliche. I don't know, the depressed comedian. I don't know. It's a thing. But here's his take on death.
I guess we'll start off with a quote. Those are fun. Albert Einstein said something along the lines of, the only reason for time is so that everything doesn't happen at once, which is kind of fun, quirky guy. And the reason I bring up time is because time is what causes all change. And change can be fun and exciting, but it is kind of the root of our suffering, right? Death, decay, emotional fallouts, falling outs with friends, lovers, whatever. And like the ultimate one of those is what I mentioned first, the death one. It's kind of a double-edged sword because you don't want to be too attached in life to anything because it's all ephemeral. It's all going to go away. But at the same time, I think in order to really be present, which is kind of the opposite of attachment, you're not attached to this outcome, you're not attached to the past, you're just truly invested in experiencing what is happening now. Kind of paradoxically, you need to be invested in experiencing some of the most, I don't know, intense aspects of life. One of those being death. Death is this really spiritual, visceral, and just deeply human universal experience that we all will encounter at some point in our lives. And in a detached way, I encountered it a lot when I was a kid. My mother was a pastor. She would minister to people on their deathbeds. And some of the time I was there to see that, if not waiting outside, because she was a single mother. So I physically grew up in churches and sometimes physically grew up around the dead and dying. Now, it's really tragic right now what we're seeing with people in Corona times who have loved ones in hospice. My grandmother's in hospice right now. Just today, she was elevated to crisis level condition, which means that she'll be gone very soon. And due to the nature of her facility, we can't even see her through a glass window. So I'm obviously sad about that. And on some selfish level, I'm just sad that I can't be there for her, but also be there with her and be there to see it. Because I think one of the best things you can do if you want to live an authentic life or be more in touch with who you are and what it is to be a human and how we share this experience with, everyone else on the earth is to radically expose yourself to some of these things that have become really sterilized by modern life, both as a means of just making things more comfortable, making everyone more comfortable, and getting rid of uncomfy things like the dead and dying or the absolutely horrifying nature of childbirth and how, if I were a man, a straight man watching potentially, my future baby mama give birth, she's getting torn hole to hole. And those are two of my favorite holes. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, so let alone, apparently the person that I want to spend my life with, or at least, chose to bring another life into the world with. So when we talk about death, I think it's also important to talk about dying, especially in regards to this idea of the sterilization of these kind of deeply important events. Last year, my father died, and I was able to go up and visit him. I was the only one of my siblings that, for financial and other reasons, was able to go up and see him. And I don't know, I never had a good relationship with my stepmother, who I don't talk to this day. And she kicked me out a few days before he died. She just needed to be alone with him. And I don't know if it was a personal thing, but I was very far from someone that she wanted in the support group. And all that's just personal baggage, but it gets to the point of not being able to see him die is like one of the biggest regrets of my life. You don't want to see that. You don't enjoy that. but I think it's so important. I think it's so deeply important. And the other thing is he had Parkinson's, and because of Muhammad Ali and uh, Michael J. Fox, people think that this is, you know, primarily uh, a sensory motor type thing, like a degenerative disease in regards to motor function, but it absolutely wreaks havoc on the brain. And so he hadn't really been himself for 5 years. In the last 2 years, it had gotten really, really bad. And so, in addition to him just being kind of in a delirious state of malnourished near deathness, he also was suffering from a neurocognitive disease that was, just making it impossible for him to know what was going on. And he was always in fear. And so, if you have a loved one that's dying, uh, go and be with them. Go see them. Do it selfishly. Do it for yourself. It's the real version of going to church. It's reconnecting with what it is to be human and really kind of putting things in perspective. I think that's an important thing that everyone can and should do. And this is really just me ranting, as I was told to do on the topic of death. On the topic of my dad, I had that death trip that we all have at some point, that kind of reckoning with my own mortality, and I had it maybe earlier than most kids. I was about 12, and by that age, I already knew that some adults were idiots and other ones that I could trust a little bit more with big questions about life. And I, at the age of 12, asked everyone who I respected, what happens when you die, if there's an afterlife, because I was horrified about the idea of dying and not existing, not being anymore, which almost seems funny now. I don't. Part of it is maybe I'm a more enlightened individual than I was when I was 12, and part of it is that I just have considerably less interest in being alive. But I'm going to stick it out because I don't know what the alternative is. Um, But all that being said, the only answer that I remember, the only answer that stuck with me that seemed to be worth a damn about death and about the afterlife, and or if there is one, I asked my dad if he believed in heaven, and what he thought happened when we died. And he said that there's too much that is wrong with the life that we know exists to worry about one that we don't know exists, which is a cop out and a way not to answer a very hard question being posed by your overly inquisitive son, but it's also a really damn good and mature answer. And so it's almost fitting that I would remember that from my childhood and that I would get that answer from the first person whose death really kind of rocked me to the core. Anyway, uh, that's what I got. I'm sorry I'm not smarter or more charming or interesting. Uh, and have me on an actual podcast sometime. I promise I'm very funny. If anyone has a time machine, go back and vote for me for Orlando's best comic. They closed voting on the 2nd of August, I believe. And also make sure that you go back and tell me that I need to be there for when my dad dies, because that'd be nice. All right, love you guys.
All right. So I'm not going to say too much about that because I think it's really important that you draw your own conclusions on this topic in particular, simply because it's death is just something that people have very, very personal beliefs about. And what I will say, though, is at the beginning of Simon's clip, he mentioned time. Now, I personally use death as a motivator in the sense that there is a finish line and there's a time limit on how much time I have. And that really helps me to take the jump, so to speak, and to kind of take the risk when it comes to people or work or anything of that nature, or just doing the things that you want to do. It kind of, for me personally, the idea of death kind of keeps me from sitting in the comfort zone for too long. So, to Simon, thank you so much for providing me with that high quality clip. It will totally not take me an hour to repair the audio on that. And thank you so much to you for listening. Do remember that you can find me on Instagram at Overheard Orlando Podcast, or you can shoot me an email at overheardorlandopodcast@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening. I'll see you next week. Stay true.